The Haelor Empire's fleet descended upon the small human vessel like a gathering storm, their warships massive, dark, and imposing, each one a testament to the Empire's centuries of military dominance. But none of their commanders had yet seen the full scope of human resilience or ingenuity. The human ship was a strange sight, an outdated freighter patched together with pieces of scavenged technology from various alien races, but there was something about it that unsettled the Haelor, a subtle hum in the air, as if the ship was alive and aware of its own defiance. They didn't understand what they were up against. They only saw a ship no bigger than a speck among their towering war machines, and thought it would be easy to destroy without a second thought. The human crew was already aware of the threat looming just beyond the stars. Their captain stood at the helm, her fingers gently tracing the worn edges of the control panel beneath her. The bridge was quiet save for the hum of the engines and the occasional click of a console. The crew had already gathered in their stations, their eyes sharp, their minds focused, their hands steady. They knew what was coming, and they knew it would be their toughest fight. Yet they had heard the stories. The Haelor Empire was unbeatable. They had wiped out entire civilizations with ease. Their ships were larger, faster, and stronger than anything humanity had ever built. But humanity had something the Haelor did not, something that would prove to be their undoing: the human spirit. The captain spoke softly into the comms, giving each member of the crew their final instructions. Her voice was steady, calm, and unwavering, a clear contrast to the growing tension in the air outside the viewscreen. The Haelor fleet was closing and moving with a precision that suggested they'd already marked their target. She let out a breath and tightened her grip on the controls. Their time had come. The first salvo was fired before they could even react. The Haelor's weapons streaked across the distance between the ships with terrifying speed and power. The human vessel shook under the force of the blast, but it didn't explode as the Haelor might have expected. Instead, the ship's shields flickered briefly, then stabilized, absorbing the energy with eerie efficiency. The Haelor commanders, watching from their flagship, muttered in confusion. They had expected to see the human ship disintegrate, but instead it held firm. And even more unnerving, the ship's sensors were already sending back readings they couldn't decipher. The human captain smiled. She knew they wouldn't understand what was happening. She didn't expect them to. The human crew had spent months repairing and retrofitting their ship with alien technology, scavenged from across the galaxy. They had integrated every piece with one goal in mind: to survive, to outlast, to fight back against the odds. And that was exactly what they intended to do. The Haelor fired again, with renewed ferocity, this time unleashing their full arsenal of energy blasts. But the human ship didn't falter. It didn't break. Instead, it surged forward, dodging the incoming fire with an agility that defied its size, and the Haelor commanders were left staring in disbelief as the human vessel danced around them like a shadow slipping through their grasp. It was a mistake to underestimate humanity, but they had made that mistake long ago, and now it was too late to turn back. The Haelor fleet was stunned. Their once smooth and confident assault had become a chaotic mess as they scrambled to track the elusive human vessel. The massive warships fired in unison, hoping to overwhelm the human ship, but it was as though the human crew had become ghosts, slipping in and out of sight faster than the sensors could adjust. Every shot missed by mere inches. The Haelor's tactical officers exchanged nervous glances as the human ship seemed to anticipate their every move. It was an impossible dance, the human vessel gliding effortlessly between their larger warships, dodging blasts and weaving through tight formations. No one had expected this kind of agility from a craft so small. The captain of the human ship watched with cold calculation as she guided her crew through the storm of fire with a precision that made it seem like they were in complete control. The Haelor commanders were growing frustrated. Their fleet was designed for overwhelming force, not for the kind of nimble hit-and-run tactics the humans were employing. They watched in disbelief as one of their cruisers attempted to line up a clean shot, but before it could fire, the human ship had already closed the distance, slipping under the cruiser's firing arc and blasting its engine core with pinpoint accuracy. The Haelor warship was left drifting as flames erupted from its crippled hull. A few more shots rang out from the human vessel before it vanished into the darkness again, and the Haelor fleet began to realize their mistake. The human ship was not just surviving, it was fighting back, and it was doing so with an almost unnatural efficiency. the Haelor flagship ordered the fleet to tighten their formation and concentrate firepower on the human vessel. But no matter what they tried, the human ship seemed to be one step ahead. It wasn't just a matter of advanced technology or alien weapons. It was something more elusive, something that no one had anticipated. The human captain's mind was sharp and unyielding. She was a strategist who had fought in countless battles and lived to tell the tale. Her crew was just as resolute. Each one of them had a role, and each one of them executed it flawlessly. They weren't relying on superior firepower. They were relying on their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. While the Haelor fleet relied on their size and strength, the humans relied on their brains. The Haelor commanders began to panic. They had never faced an enemy who thought this way before. Their advanced weapon systems were no match for the human ingenuity that was disrupting their every move. The human captain's voice was steady as she issued new orders to her crew. Her confidence was unshakable. They were winning not just by force, but by wit and determination. The Haelor fleet was slowly being dismantled piece by piece. They had underestimated the resolve of humanity, and now they were paying the price as another Haelor warship faltered, its systems fried from a sudden surge of electromagnetic interference. The captain allowed herself a small smile. They hadn't just won the battle yet, but the seeds of their victory were being planted, and the Haelor fleet was starting to crumble under the weight of their own arrogance. The human ship surged forward again with relentless precision, and the Haelor commanders realized something that no one had warned them about: the humans would never surrender. The Haelor fleet was now in disarray. The humans were not just surviving, they were picking apart the Haelor warships with ruthless efficiency. Every attempt to regroup was met with another unexpected move. The human ship's captain remained a calm presence in the chaos, her orders crisp and clear. Her voice carried an almost eerie confidence through the comms. Even as Haelor weapons continued to barrage, the hull of her vessel outside the ship was alive with energy. A flash of light here, a sudden ripple of movement there. But the human ship never lost its rhythm. Every strike made was calculated, every evasion executed with a purpose. The Haelor commanders were growing increasingly frantic. Their fleet was being torn apart by a smaller ship, and they still couldn't understand why. Their every move seemed to be anticipated. The human ship didn't have superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but it had something the Haelor had not expected: creativity. The human captain could almost feel the battlefield like a chessboard shifting and rearranging with each move the enemy made. She wasn't just reacting, she was planning 3 steps ahead. Every countermeasure and every tactic she employed came from the same source: her understanding of her enemies and the confidence to exploit their weaknesses. One by one, another Haelor cruiser was hit. This time, its engines exploded in a bright flash of fire as a perfectly timed blast from the human ship's energy cannons ripped through the rear plating. The human captain could feel the vibrations through her feet and knew immediately that their ship had scored another victory. The crew was silent as they moved into their next position. No one had expected the battle to be this fierce. No one had expected the humans to be this capable, and certainly no one had expected them to be winning. But here they were picking off Haelor ships, one by one, taking advantage of every opportunity with precise timing and masterful coordination. While the Haelor fleet was built to crush and dominate, the humans were showing them what it meant to fight with intelligence instead of brute strength. The Haelor flagship's lead strategist gripped his console in frustration, watching as one of their destroyers limped away from the battle, disabled and helpless. They had underestimated the human crew, and now their pride was quickly turning into fear. The humans weren't just outwitting them, they were outmaneuvering them, and no one knew how to stop it. The Haelor flagship attempted to lock onto the human ship with their most powerful weapon systems, but once again the human vessel was already gone, slipping through the gaps in the fleet like a wisp of smoke. The Haelor commanders exchanged panicked orders, but their enemies were already far ahead. They had begun to realize something they had never been taught: to consider a smaller enemy with the will to fight would never be defeated by size or strength alone. It was the mind that determined the outcome of a battle, and in this case the human mind had proven to be more dangerous than they could have imagined. Another Haelor warship exploded in the distance as the human ship executed another flawless attack. The human captain allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, But there was no time for celebration. They weren't done yet. They still had a fleet to dismantle, and the battle was far from over. But as the Haelor fleet continued to stumble under the relentless assault from a force they had written off as inferior, one thing became clear: humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they had only just begun. The Haelor commanders were losing their grip on the situation. With every passing moment, their once unshakable confidence had turned to doubt as the human ship continued to strike and vanish without warning. Each attack was like a calculated blow to their pride. They couldn't understand it. The human vessel wasn't using the same weapons. They were the humans, didn't have the same technology. They didn't have the same ships. And yet they were doing something that made the Haelor's weapons useless. They were making the impossible seem like a mere inconvenience. The human captain guided her ship with unparalleled precision. Each maneuver was a calculated risk, but one that paid off every time. The crew executed their tasks without hesitation and without fear. As the Haelor ships closed in, the human vessel didn't retreat. It surged forward with incredible speed, cutting through the enemy formation like a blade through soft metal. With a well-timed blast from their ion cannons, they disabled the shield generators on the closest Haelor cruiser. Its weapons went silent, and it was left vulnerable. The human ship didn't waste a second. It blasted through the cruiser's engines, sending it into an uncontrollable spiral, and then disappeared back into the dark of space to strike again. The Haelor flagship was in full panic mode. Their fleet was disintegrating, and they had no way of countering the human ship's relentless assault. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were playing a game with no rules, and every move was designed to ensure they would come out victorious. The Haelor fleet's once imposing numbers were now shrinking faster than they could replace them. The human captain's voice came through the comms again. It was steady and calm as always, but this time there was a sharp edge to it, a quiet confidence that sent a chill down the spines of the Haelor commanders. "You've underestimated us," she said softly, the words reverberating across the comms with a cold clarity. It was a simple message, but one that conveyed everything they needed to know. The humans were in control now. The Haelor flagship retaliated with a massive wave of energy cannons, but the human ship was already gone, slipping into the shadow of one of their larger warships like a wisp of smoke, and the next moment, the human vessel's energy beam sliced through the flagship's communication array. The Haelor fleet was deafened and disoriented as their orders were cut off from one another. Another Haelor warship was disabled with a precise strike on its engines, and it began to drift like a lifeless hulk in the vast emptiness of space. The human ship was now striking at the Haelor's most vital weak points: their weapon systems, their engines, their shields. The Haelor were completely unable to keep up. Their communications were fragmented, and their fleet was becoming scattered as the humans made quick work of their isolated targets. The human captain's plan was unfolding exactly as she had predicted. The Haelor were not just outgunned, they were outclassed at every level. They were struggling to stay afloat in a battle of brains versus brawn, and it was quickly becoming clear that the humans had the upper hand. But the Haelor commanders refused to accept the inevitable. They were supposed to be the supreme rulers of the galaxy. They had conquered countless species and decimated entire fleets with ease, yet here they were being outplayed by a smaller and weaker opponent. They rallied their forces for one last assault, desperate to maintain some shred of dignity. But it was too late. The humans were always one step ahead, and they knew the final blow was coming. The Haelor flagship was caught off guard as a brilliant EMP pulse surged through its hull, its systems flickering as the human ship charged forward and delivered a devastating blow to its command center. The flagship was crippled. The once proud symbol of the Haelors might now reduced to nothing but a floating hulk among the wreckage of their fallen fleet. The Haelor had made a deadly mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and now it was too late to turn back. The Haelor fleet was in shambles. Now their once coordinated attack had devolved into a frantic scramble for survival as the human ship picked off their warships one by one. No longer did they hold the advantage of size or firepower. Instead, they were being relentlessly dismantled by the very thing they had dismissed as a weakness: the human crew's resourcefulness and adaptability. Every time the Haelor tried to regroup, the human captain was already on the move, exploiting the smallest opening in their defenses, using their own weapons and technology against them. The Haelor flagship was drifting now, a hulking mass of broken metal and shattered systems, its once proud commanders silenced by the efficiency of their opponent's tactics. The human ship's crew was a well-oiled machine, each member working in perfect harmony. They didn't need to communicate with words anymore. The battle had become an extension of they knew their captain's every thought, and the captain knew theirs without hesitation or doubt. The crew responded to each command as if they had all become one single entity, a force of nature that seemed impossible to stop. The Haelor officers watched in disbelief as another of their destroyers was left burning in space, its shields down, and its engine core ruptured by a single well-placed shot. The human ship didn't just kill it, it crippled it in such a way that the Haelor couldn't salvage it. They couldn't recover their losses, and the fear began to settle in their ranks. The once proud empire that had ruled over galaxies was now on the defensive, fighting not for victory, but for survival. The human captain leaned forward as her eyes tracked the battle unfolding across the view screen. Her hand gripped the control panel with unshakable resolve. She knew this moment was crucial. They had already turned the tide of battle. Now it was time to finish what they had started. The Haelor were arrogant. They had assumed that humanity was weak. They had assumed that their power would be enough to crush a single human vessel, but they had underestimated the one thing that could never be calculated or controlled: the will to fight for survival, and the human desire to protect their own. They had not only fought with their advanced technology and superior tactics, they had fought with everything they had, with everything they were. And now it was paying off in ways that the Haelor could not possibly understand. As the human ship closed in on another Haelor cruiser, the crew worked like a symphony, each movement perfectly timed, each action a calculated step toward victory. A brilliant pulse of energy fired from their cannons struck the enemy ship dead center, and the Haelor cruiser was torn apart as its defenses collapsed under the force of the blast. Another ship gone from the fleet, another strike against their already fragile morale. The Haelor flagship's bridge was silent now, the last few commanders left staring out into the vastness of space, knowing they had lost and knowing there was no escape from the consequences of their mistake. The human captain didn't relish in their fear or desperation. She knew this wasn't about vengeance, it was about survival and securing their place in the galaxy. The Haelor had underestimated humanity's ability to fight and to adapt. They had never faced an enemy who fought with such resolve, and now the Haelor fleet was paying the price. They had turned the human ship into something far more deadly than a simple target. They had turned it into a symbol of defiance and strength, and it was this symbol that would break their empire's dominance once and for all. As the final Haelor warship flickered and died under another precise strike, the human captain looked out at the vast remains of the once proud fleet and allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The Haelor had made a deadly mistake attacking the ship, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Haelor fleet was broken beyond repair, a scattered and disoriented mass of damaged ships, slowly drifting through space, their once proud formation nothing but a distant memory. The human ship had turned the tide of battle, leaving the Haelor with nothing but wreckage and fear. With every new strike, the human captain and her crew had proven that sheer size and firepower were no match for ingenuity, precision, and sheer willpower. The Haelor had underestimated humanity, and now the consequences were undeniable. Inside the human ship, the atmosphere was tense but focused. The crew moved with purpose, each member working in perfect sync as they prepared for the final phase of their assault. The captain's eyes were locked onto the view screen, her mind racing through the next steps of the plan. The Haelor's flagship was still floating, barely functional, its systems in disarray, but it remained a symbol of their once unstoppable might. It was a sight that the human captain knew they couldn't leave behind. The fight wasn't over, not yet. One final strike was necessary to ensure the Haelor could never again threaten humanity. "Prepare for a full systems override," the captain said quietly, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "We finish this now." The crew responded without hesitation, their hands moving swiftly to execute the orders. A low hum vibrated through the ship as they initiated the override sequence. The human vessel, though damaged from the ongoing battle, had been reinforced with technology scavenged from across the galaxy, technology the Haelor had never dreamed of. The human ship was more than just a vessel. It was a weapon, a tool, and a symbol all at once. As the Haelor flagship remained adrift, its once efficient weapon systems, now little more than malfunctioning relics, the human ship slipped into position behind it, unnoticed by the remaining Haelor forces. The Haelor flagship's bridge was in chaos. Officers scrambled to restore communications, to regain some semblance of control, but they were far too late. The human ship was already inside their defenses, maneuvering with deadly grace. The final phase had begun. The captain's eyes narrowed as she watched the Haelor ship's systems flicker. The human ship was now linked directly into the Haelor flagship's network, hijacking the very core of their command systems. In an instant, the Haelor flagship's weapons were turned against its own fleet. The human crew had infiltrated their control systems so thoroughly that the Haelor's once advanced technology had become their own undoing. "What's happening?" A Haelor officer gasped as the sensors flared with sudden alerts. Their fleet was in disarray. Their own ships were firing on one another, their weapons turned against their allies, each blast another nail in the coffin of their empire. "Captain, we're locked out," another Haelor officer cried out, panic creeping into his voice. The human captain leaned forward, her fingers dancing across the console, controlling every move, every system. With a final push, she initiated the overload. The Haelor flagship's energy core began to destabilize, and within seconds, the once mighty ship erupted in a violent explosion. The shockwave rippled outward, sending debris from the flagship scattering across the battlefield. A devastating reminder of what happened when one underestimated humanity. On the human ship, the crew watched in silence as the last of the Haelor fleet was torn apart. The captain took a deep breath, allowing herself a rare moment of relief. But there was no time to celebrate. Not yet. They had secured victory, but there was still the matter of returning home, of ensuring that the galaxy knew humanity's name. The Haelor Empire had learned a harsh truth that day. The strength of their fleet and the vastness of their power could not stand against the resolve and ingenuity of the humans. It was a lesson they would never forget. And as the human captain set her sights on the stars ahead, she knew that the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. In the eerie silence that followed the explosion of the Haelor flagship, the human captain stood at the helm of her ship, her gaze fixed on the fractured remains of the Haelor fleet. What had once been a symbol of galactic dominance now lay scattered across the void, reduced to nothing more than debris and smoldering wreckage. The human ship had executed the perfect strike, delivering the final blow to an empire that had once been untouchable. But the captain knew that despite the resounding victory, this was not the time for complacency. The war was not over yet. The galaxy needed to see the full measure of humanity's strength. "Status report." The captain's voice rang out, firm but calm. She turned to face the bridge crew, her eyes scanning the faces of those who had fought alongside her. "We've taken minor damage," the first officer replied, his eyes flickering over the console in front of him. "Shields are still holding, though we're low on power reserves. The main weapon systems are intact, but we'll need to scavenge resources to maintain them." "Understood," the captain said, her expression unreadable. "Prepare the crew for a return to known space. We've made our mark here, but we need to send the message to the galaxy. We cannot afford to let this moment fade into the shadows." As the crew worked swiftly to prepare the ship for its journey home, the captain stood by the viewport, contemplating the aftermath. The Haelor had been a relentless and brutal force, their imperial ambitions stretching across the galaxy. But now, they had learned a painful truth. Humanity was not something to be dismissed or ignored. The human spirit had proven itself stronger than any weapon, more cunning than any fleet, and more enduring than any empire. Behind her, the communications officer spoke up, breaking her thoughts. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal from a nearby Haelor warship. It's on the edge of the battlefield, heavily damaged. It's trying to make a run for it." The captain's eyes narrowed. She had heard of Haelor ships attempting to flee before. their captains too proud to surrender even in the face of utter defeat. She didn't need to be told what to do. "Lock onto that signal and intercept," she ordered. "We're not here to chase ghosts. Finish what we started." With a sudden jolt, the ship surged forward, its engines roaring to life as it cut through the void toward the last vestige of Haelor resistance. The crew worked in flawless unison, each person focused on their task, their movements smooth and practiced. It was clear that the battle had forged a new unity among them. They were no longer simply fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future, for humanity's place in the stars. The crippled Haelor ship appeared on their scanners, a drifting hulk desperately trying to limp away from the scene of its defeat. Its shields were down, its engine sputtering as it struggled to maintain any semblance of control. The human ship approached slowly, deliberately, a predator moving in for the kill. This time, there would be no escape. "Captain, they're broadcasting a message," the communications officer said, her fingers flying over her console. "Put it through," the captain said. She wasn't interested in their excuses or pleas for mercy. The time for negotiations was long past. The voice that crackled through the comms was ragged and filled with fear. "This is Commander Varix of the Haelor Imperial Navy. We surrender. Please, spare us." The captain's expression hardened. "Your fleet is dead. You're nothing but a remnant now. You had your chance." With that, she issued the final order. The human ship fired its remaining cannons, and the last Haelor warship was torn apart in a single decisive blast. Its fragments floated through space, just like the rest of the Haelor's shattered empire. As the dust settled, the captain took a slow breath, her mind already moving on to the next phase. The message had been sent, and the galaxy had learned what happened when they underestimated humanity. But the captain knew one thing for certain. This victory would echo for generations to come. Humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. They had earned their place among the stars, and no one, not even the Haelor, could take that away from them. The human ship moved silently through the void, its mission now complete, the galaxy forever changed by the crew's unwavering determination. The battle against the Haelor had been fierce, but it had been won. As the wreckage of the once mighty Haelor fleet floated in the distance, a strange sense of peace settled over the crew. They had faced down an empire and emerged victorious, but the victory was bittersweet. Their mission had been successful, but there was much more to be done. The captain stood at the helm, her hands resting lightly on the control panel as she gazed out at the vast expanse of space. The stars seemed to shine brighter now, as though the universe itself had taken notice of humanity's triumph. There was a quiet moment, one that felt as though time itself had paused to reflect on what had just transpired. The captain allowed herself a moment of pride, but only for a moment. There was still much work ahead. "Captain," the communications officer said, breaking the silence, "we've received a transmission from the Alliance. They want to speak with you." The captain turned, her brow furrowed. The Alliance was an amalgamation of numerous species, united by the common goal of ensuring peace and stability across the galaxy. The Haelor's attack on humanity had sent ripples through every corner of the known universe. The Alliance had been watching, waiting, and now it seemed they wanted answers. "Put them through," the captain replied, her voice calm but with a hint of curiosity. A holographic image flickered to life in front of her, and a voice she recognized instantly spoke. "Captain, it's good to see you," Admiral Lyra, a seasoned leader of the Alliance, said. "We've been following your progress. I must say, you've surprised us all." The captain nodded, her gaze still fixed on the view of the stars outside. "We did what needed to be done. Humanity has earned its place in this galaxy. It's time for the rest of the universe to recognize that." The Admiral's expression softened. "Indeed you have. The Haelor Empire's defeat has sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. We've received word from several systems that their forces have been scattered, their hold on power broken. But there's something else, something we need to discuss." The captain tilted her head, sensing the seriousness in the Admiral's voice. "Go on." The Haelor were not acting alone. "We've intercepted intelligence suggesting that their attack on humanity was only one part of a larger, more dangerous plan. There are other factions, other powers, who now see humanity as a threat. The galaxy may be watching, but there are others who are already preparing for conflict." The captain's expression hardened. The galaxy had changed, but it was clear that peace was far from guaranteed. The victory over the Haelor was just one battle in a much larger war, and humanity was now on the radar of those who would seek to control, conquer, or eliminate them. "We'll be ready," the captain said firmly. "Humanity will not cower, not ever again. We've learned that the universe does not give us peace. We have to take it." Admiral Lyra nodded, her expression somber. "We will stand with you, but you must know, this is only the beginning. There will be those who come for you, and they will not be as easily defeated as the Haelor." The captain's lips curved into a slight smile, a determined fire flickering in her eyes. "We've already shown what happens when someone underestimates us. Let them come." As the transmission ended, the captain turned to face her crew. They had accomplished the impossible, but the journey was far from over. Humanity had proven its strength, its intelligence, and its resolve. The universe would never forget the day the Haelor Empire fell, and humanity's rise had begun. "Prepare for departure," the captain ordered. "We've made history today. Now it's time to make the future." The crew rallied behind her, a unified force that knew what was at stake. With the Haelor behind them and new threats looming on the horizon, humanity was no longer just a participant in the galaxy's story. They were writing it, and no one would stand in their way.